Welcome to the CalRecycle Grants 101 workshop. Today, we are going to go over the basics of the CalRecycle grant application process. Disclaimer: this workshop is not tailored to any individual funding program. All topics discussed refer to the general CalRecycle grant application process. Please direct any program-specific comments or questions to the respective grant program inbox. CalRecycle has a funding webpage where you can find additional information regarding the department's grants, payment, and loan programs. This page is set up by entity type. You can select your entity type, such as tribal entities or schools, and a drop-down box will provide a list of eligible grants. Each grant listed has a link to a page dedicated to that grant, where you can find more information on the specifics of the grant program. The QR code goes to the Funding, Grants, Payments, and Loans webpage. Grants 101 Agenda. First, we will walk through the grant criteria process, followed by the application package. We will then cover various aspects of our grant management system, GMS, and discuss the post-application submission procedure. This slide is a brief look at the application and award process. In this presentation, we will discuss the criteria process, application, evaluation and scoring, and the awards and grant agreements process. A Criteria Request for Approval, RFA, is a document staff prepare for actions that require approval from the CalRecycle Director or the delegated authority for a new program or cycle. The criteria RFA may also include any relevant additions, adjustments, or amendments regarding a program from previous cycles. The main areas outlined within the criteria RFA are the summary of request, background and analysis, eligibility, applicant's project's costs, scoring and evaluation process, award amounts, and timelines. The proposed criteria are created by CalRecycle subject matter experts, our legal team, and our executive team, applying any surrounding laws that may influence the program. Within the criteria RFA is the summary of request, which provides a brief description of the proposed outline of the particular grant program cycle. The program background and statutory authority provide relevant information describing the purpose and scope of the grant and the statute or regulations for the program. This includes a breakdown of the funds allocated based on funding availability. The criteria RFA includes a proposed process and eligibility section. This portion differs based on whether the program is a non-competitive or competitive program. Non-competitive programs are for a very few and specific programs where statute dictates eligible applicant types, such as our local enforcement agency grant program. Most of our other grant programs are competitive and are either scored or evaluated based on a set of criterion developed by CalRecycle. All applications will be reviewed for completeness. If complete, competitive grant applications will be moved for scoring or ranking, and if non-competitive, they will be moved to eligibility for awards. This section also discusses eligibility. Here we list the eligible applicant types and projects or products. It is important to ensure the applicant meets the criteria for the program to be considered eligible to apply for program funding. Applicants, projects, or products outside of the scope identified in the application package are ineligible and lead to a disqualification. All programs are evaluated. Once the application is identified as eligible and complete, there is usually an additional evaluation conducted by the program staff and varies based on the program requirements. This section goes into detail regarding the type of scoring or evaluation process based on the program. Some of our competitive grants are scored based on a scoring criteria that is attached to the criteria RFA and sent out for public comment that we will discuss shortly. Other competitive programs are ranked based on an evaluation developed by the department. For example, if the project is benefiting a disadvantaged community or conducting cleanup activities on tribal lands, the application may be ranked higher. Again, this is just an example and varies based on statute and regulations or program needs. As previously mentioned, non-competitive programs are not scored or ranked, but instead awarded based on eligibility per their prescribed statute or regulations. The following sections of the criteria RFA discuss award amounts, proposed changes if applicable, and tentative timeline. The award amount section identifies the minimum and maximum award amounts. Applicants must stay within this range when requesting funds, otherwise the application may be disqualified. These amounts are usually determined based on project needs and funding availability. If this is not a new program, any proposed changes from a previous cycle may be listed here. Finally, we provide a timeline for the grant from application release to the end of grant term. It is important to note that this is a tentative timeline. While the dates listed here are subject to change, the document is not updated if that happens. This slide is just an example of what the documents could look like. As previously mentioned, some of our grant programs are scored. Therefore, we develop and provide a scoring criteria that reflects scoring categories, their associated description, and the minimum and maximum points possible. Scoring categories vary from program to program, but some examples include project description and project viability. Each category has its own set of requirements that must be addressed in the application. Some categories are weighted, meaning the score for one category may double, making it more impactful to the overall score. The scoring criteria also identifies the minimum score required to be considered for funding, along with the maximum score possible. This slide shows an example of the scoring criteria. Some recommended best practices include providing feedback and asking relevant programmatic questions during the public comment period. Also, pay close attention to program background, eligible applicants, eligible projects costs, scoring criteria. The application package includes the Notice of Funds Available, also known as the NOFA, the application guidelines and instructions, application documents such as the work plan, budget and narrative proposal, the terms and conditions, and the procedures and requirements. Please note, each grant program may have additional requirements. The NOVA advertises the grant cycle on the CalRecycle funding page. It provides a high level of information with eligibility, funding information, timelines, plus links to various reference documents like the questions and answers webpage, application guidelines, procedures and requirements, and terms and conditions. This slide shows an example of what a NOFA webpage looks like. As mentioned, it will include the name of the grant, fiscal year, if applicable, and the link to the criteria. The application guidelines and instructions is a critical document that provides applicants with instructions to access and complete the application online and information about grant administration. This document provides information on eligibility, grant term, funding, how to access and complete information in the Grants Management System, also known as GMS, application documents, authorization documents, the grant review and award process, and grant program administration. It is very important that applicants read this document in its entirety to ensure submission of a complete and eligible application. Many competitive grant programs require a narrative proposal. This is an application document used to describe the details of the proposed project. The narrative proposal is unique to each grant program. The document is broken down into categories that are essential for the program. Each category has associated questions and/or prompts that the applicant is required to answer. Each answer provides a detailed description of the project and its impact. Please make sure that your narrative responses are concise, detailed, clear, and most importantly, address each question. This slide shows an example of a narrative proposal. This document includes details about the grant the applicant is applying for, plus specific instructions to follow. This document helps CalRecycle understand what your project is going to be. All grant programs require a budget to identify requested eligible costs, but the budget template or submission may vary depending on the program. All programs must identify category costs in the Grants Management System, or GMS. This will be addressed later in the presentation. Some programs require a supplemental budget template. This budget template includes instructions on completing the form. Be sure that any costs identified in the budget align with the eligible costs identified in the application package. This slide shows an example of an acceptable budget document. The applicant will complete this form listing various items in the applicable categories, such as operating expenses, education, and personnel costs, and provide the total budgeted expense amount. The work plan template is required for most competitive grant programs. The work plan is a document that portrays the project's milestones from the notice to proceed to the end of the grant term. It provides a timeline for major activities, steps or tasks necessary to implement the project, and ensures it is achievable within the grant term. When does the applicant anticipate hiring staff? What is phase 1 of the project? When is equipment going to be purchased and installed? This is the place where the applicant can let CalRecycle know those details. Make sure to read the program-specific application requirements in the guidelines and instructions for the applicable grant. Some requirements may include business or material flow charts, proof of certification and registration, permitting documents, feedstock certification form, and equipment quotes. Once an applicant is awarded and enters into a grant agreement, the procedures and requirements will provide the terms that the grantee must follow. The Procedures and Requirements document describes project and reporting requirements, report due dates, report contents, grant payment conditions, eligible and ineligible project costs, project completion and closeout procedures, and records and audit requirements. This is a reference document that will be used during the entirety of the grant term. Let's discuss the eligible and ineligible cost section of the Procedures and Requirements. Eligible costs vary for each grant program and may be broad to cover the scope. To ensure the integrity of the program and to meet the scope, CalRecycle may work with the grantee to discuss eligible and ineligible costs. We recommend that you reach out to your grant manager to request a review of potential costs. Eligible costs must be spent after receiving the notice to proceed email, or July 1 for non-competitive programs, and before the end of the grant term. Ineligible costs are identified as costs not included in the approved budget and not directly related to the approved project. It is important to note that most CalRecycle grants are reimbursement-based. This means payments are made to the grantee on a reimbursement basis or after the cost is incurred, and only for eligible costs incurred during the grant term and as detailed in the approved budget and work plan. The terms and conditions provide legal terms, definitions, and conditions applicable to all grants that were developed in coordination with CalRecycle's Chief Counsel and executive team. This is a reference document that will also be used during the entirety of the grant term. Best practices for the application package. This is very important to make note of. Utilizing a document form other than official CalRecycle templates, which include tampering with the CalRecycle version, unlocking documents, or otherwise circumventing imposed character limits, may lead to disqualification. Always review your procedures and requirements for eligible costs and keep in mind that some categories have caps. In other words, limits. An additional best practice includes consultant oversight. If you choose to use a consultant to complete your application package, please make sure you read the documents in full and confirm the information correctly reflects your project. CalRecycle will be migrating to a new platform this fall. Until then, the grants management system and all associated processes will remain the same. When this migration occurs, many of the requirements and processes associated with applying for a grant will remain relatively unchanged. The biggest change will be the configuration view of the new database. In the future, CalRecycle will be providing additional updates and guidance to ease this transition.
On the CalRecycle funding webpage, there is a link to the Application and Grant Management Tools webpage, where you will see the portal to our Grants Management System database, some video tutorials, and the portal to creating a web pass for new users as well as for returning users that need to update their login credentials. A web pass account must be created to use the Grants Management System, which from here on out will be referred to as GMS. Once you are signed into GMS, from your homepage, you can either go to the left and select Apply for a Grant, or to the top right and select Apply. All open applications will then appear on the screen. Once you've chosen your grant and selected Start Application, an intake screen will pop up for the user to input their contact information.
After the intake screen, you will be taken to the Summary tab of your application, where you can find details related to your application under the Application Information section. You will also find resource links, the ability to download resource and application documents, and you will find checklists for application requirements. You will also have the ability to view the application certification and submit the application. Resource links and resource documents are available to applicants to provide detailed information about a specific grant program and detailed instructions and guidance for completing an application. An applicant should familiarize themselves with all links and documents provided here. The application guideline and instructions is a comprehensive document that will outline the application process from start to finish. It includes a detailed section going over the requirements for authorization documents, which are legal documents you provide that state you are authorized to apply for the grant, such as the resolution, and also provides a resource link to examples and templates for those documents to help applicants determine which one is applicable to their applicant type and how to draft it. The application document section is another important area to pay attention to. This is where you will find the required document templates to download, fill out, and submit. Each document will have its own set of instructions, both in the document itself as well as in the application guidelines and instructions. On the right-hand side of the Summary tab are some checklists. At the top, you will see the application checklist that will help you determine what you have completed in GMS and what is still pending. The checklists below are for required documents, and those may be applicable to your application or project. Required documents must be submitted by the application due date, except for the authorization documents, which must be submitted by the authorization document due date, which is a secondary due date. In regard to supporting documents, you may be able to submit your application without uploading any of these, but depending on your application or project, some of these may be required for the application to be deemed completed upon our review. It is the responsibility of the applicant to review the information provided in the application guidelines and instructions to determine what supporting documents are applicable. Below these checklists is a section where you can download the application certification, fill it out, and upload it to the Documents tab, and then be able to submit the application. These are disabled and will be enabled upon the completion of all the requirements. Once you've started an application, you may exit and resume your application at any point, and your progress will be saved. After signing back into GMS, your application will appear on the homepage under My Active Grant Applications, where you can access the application. You can then continue to go through the tabs and complete the application. Each tab in GMS will have general instructions at the top of each page. Detailed instructions can be found in the Application Guidelines and Instructions document under the Application Instructions section. We will now go ahead and review each tab as they appear from left to right on the application. The Applicant and Participant tab is where you will input the information of the entity or entities that are applying for the grant. When selecting Add Applicant/Participant, you may want to use the search bar to review results before selecting to add a new name. If an organization has applied for grants in the past, their information has been saved in our database, and you can simply select Add Applicant to the right of the name. For those that are not in our database already, when adding a new applicant or participant's name, please pay close attention to the federal tax ID number and organization type. This is important because it allows CalRecycle to determine applicant eligibility based on program requirements. The requirements in the Detail tab will vary from program to program, but grant funds requested, payment address, and project summary are consistent entry fields across the board. When inputting the grant funds requested amount, it is important to review the requirements regarding allowable minimums and maximums an applicant can request. It is also important to round to the nearest whole dollar and ensure the requested amounts match the Budget tab, and, if applicable, they should also match the amount stated in the budget document that you may need to fill out. In this tab, the payment address can be, but does not need to be, the physical address of the project. Entities that have applied for grants in the past may already have verifiable and active addresses in our payee database, so please check with your organization if this is the case. The project summary, or statement of use, typically consists of a brief 3 to 5 sentence description, but it is the applicant's responsibility to review the requirements for this section for the program they are applying for. Some programs will have questions to fill out in this tab as well, and that will vary from program to program and must be completed to meet the requirement for this tab. In the Contacts tab, the primary contact information by default is the user's information that is applying for the grant. This can be adjusted at this point by selecting the user's name and editing the entry fields. Additional contacts may be added here, and multiple users can have access to the application as long as they create their own WebPass account. When assigning a signature authority contact, please make sure this can be verifiable with the authorization documents submitted or that will be submitted by the secondary due date, and the verified status will be updated by CalRecycle staff upon our review. As mentioned earlier, the total budgeted funds must align with the requested amounts. The resource document in the Summary tab, titled the Procedures and Requirements document, will provide detailed requirements depending on the grant you are applying for. This will include requirements regarding eligible costs for budget categories, and some programs may even have caps on certain categories or eligible costs. Some grant programs may require you to fill out the Sites tab, and this is where physical addresses of projects will typically be entered. GMS has marked the required fields that are applicable to all grant programs across the board, but certain grant programs may require more information, which will be outlined in the application guidelines and instructions. This may include, but is not limited to, the budget amount per site, statement of use summary, and so on. The Documents tab is where all required and supporting documents will be uploaded. The application guidelines and instructions will have detailed requirements for each document type, and CalRecycle templates are available for download in the Summary tab. When uploading a document, please review our document upload policy to avoid any uploading errors. Much like the Summary tab, here you will also see the requirements checklist to help you keep track of your progress as you upload documents. Once all other documents have been uploaded, you may go back to the Summary tab to download, sign, and upload the application certification to the Documents tab. After reviewing the contents of the application certification, please pay close attention to who is authorized to certify and sign the application, and CalRecycle's requirements for e-signature or wet signatures. Signature authorities must be verifiable in accordance with authorization documents submitted, and e-signatures must be completed through a certified digital signature program such as Adobe Digital ID or DocuSign. Once all the requirements are met, the Submit button in the Summary tab will now be enabled. To verify you have submitted your application, the status of your application in the Summary tab under Application Information will change to Submitted, and you will also see that reflected on your sign-in homepage. If you suspect you made a mistake on your application, you may access your application prior to the due date by selecting Application to the right. To summarize, these are the best practices to keep in mind when completing your application. Utilize the Summary tab for additional information, resources, and guidance. Ensure grant funds requested is inputted accurately. Refer to the Guidelines and Instructions document to guide you through the GMS tabs. When uploading documents, ensure documents are complete. Follow the upload policy and CalRecycle's requirements for signature. Ensure signature authority contacts are verifiable. Finally, utilize the guidance of the resource links and documents for drafting these authorization documents.
Any questions about competitive grant applications must be submitted in writing to the grant program email box. Please refer to the grant program webpage and Q&A webpage for specific email boxes and due dates. To receive a response, a question must pertain to clarification of the application and the requirements in the application process. Any questions submitted pertaining to other elements of the grant program will not be posted on the official Q&A webpage. Once eligible questions are received, staff will draft, review, and approve responses. All questions and answers will be posted during the application period and are subject to updates. It is the applicant's responsibility to check the Q&A website for the latest information regarding the grant cycle. In this next section, we'll discuss the awards process and grant agreements. Once program staff has scored or evaluated all applications and determined ranking, the program lead prepares a request for approval, an RFA, to recommend the award of grant funds. This recommendation is presented at CalRecycle's monthly public meeting. The DICE Deputy Director, in consultation with CalRecycle's Director, approves the RFA. After the award RFA is approved, our Fiscal and Process Oversight Cycle Support Team prepares and generates the grant agreement cover sheets. Program lead staff then send the award email package to awarded grantees. This award email package contains critical instructions, including Adobe Sign e-signatures, that all awardees must read and follow. While individual agreement provisions vary across grant programs, if CalRecycle has not received notification that the grant agreement cover sheet is digitally signed, or the recommended grantee does not pay or bring current all outstanding debts or scheduled payments owed by it to CalRecycle within 60 calendar days of the date of the award letter, then the proposed grantee will not have fulfilled the required grant agreement conditions, and the award will be void. Awardees will receive an auto email notification once the grant agreement is completed in Adobe Sign. However, this does not mean that they may commence work. Awardees must wait until program lead staff sends the Notice to Proceed email, or July 1st for non-competitive programs, an executed grant agreement to the awardee. Once received, the grantee can begin their respective grant project. We leave you with a snapshot view of the approximate grant evaluation timeline from the application due date to the Notice to Proceed. Please note, these timelines and process times are variable and are unique to each grant program. We've provided the following QR codes and email address to help keep you informed. Please make sure you subscribe to the CalRecycle listservs, check out our grant program videos, and finally, utilize the grants at calrecycle.ca.gov email inbox to submit any additional comments or final questions.